The words were torn from a throat gone dry, hushed against the sting of the wind. She stood in the middle of the road, barefoot, dust clinging to her bruised ankles. Her dress was torn at the hem, the color of storm-worn linen. Eyes lowered, hair tangled across her face. She shook as the sun bore down like a merciless overseer. The rancher halted where the dirt split the street, boots grinding against grit. His breath caught, his shadow stretching long behind him. He lowered himself, knee pressed into the burning ground, as though kneeling not in pity but in reverence. "You don't have to say it," he murmured, though she would not raise her eyes. A door slammed somewhere behind. A shutter rattled. The whole town seemed to hold its breath, watching from behind slits of wood and glass. The saloon sign groaned overhead, chains squealing as the desert wind tugged it back and forth. She whispered again, voice quivering like dry reeds at a river's edge. "Don't look." But they all were, not with compassion, not with kindness. Curiosity was crueler than a bullet. Whispers scraped the silence. "That's the widow Avery. Poor thing, broken thing." She turned, skirts brushing the dirt, and walked with small steps toward the edge of the road. Her bare soles pressed into pebbles, leaving faint tracks that the wind tried to erase. The rancher stayed kneeling long after she had passed, his head bowed, hat in hand, as though the weight of her silence pinned him there. Beyond her path, the land spread wide and dry. Creosote and mesquite leaned brittle against the earth. A vulture traced circles above the canyon rim, its shadow gliding across the cracked plain. From the ridge, the faint echo of horses' hooves rattled the stillness. Too far to see, close enough to dread. The widow paused at her fence line. Her house crouched low against the horizon, with bleached gray by sun and grief. The fields lay untended, soil dry as bone. Still, she stepped inside as if it were a sanctuary no man could touch. She sat upon the porch, fingers tightening in her lap, gaze fixed on the road she had walked moments before. Her chest rose and fell uneven, but no tears came. The bruises marked her skin, but something deeper marked her silence. The town returned to its hum. Boots scuffed against boardwalks, whispers slithered from door to door, and a fiddle scratched faintly from inside the saloon. Yet every so often, faces turned toward the edge of town, toward the porch where she sat unmoving, watching the horizon. The wind shifted, carrying dust across the graves on the hill, bending the crooked wooden markers until they seemed to bow. Her eyes flickered there and lingered, for a breath. Her lips parted as though she might speak. Then nothing. Silence again, heavy as a shroud. And so the day held her secret, waiting for the storm that was coming. The first rider came at dusk, black hat pulled low, dust trailing behind him like smoke from a fire not yet burning. The sound of hooves cracked through the stillness, sharp and certain. By the time he reached the edge of town, 5 more rode in his wake. Long coats swung with each trot, rifles slung across saddles. Their leader, Ezekiel Crow, carried himself with a stillness more dangerous than rage. He did not smile, did not scowl. He only looked, and the town lowered its eyes. Doors slammed shut. Lamps went dark. Mothers pulled children from the street, their small feet scuffing wood as they were dragged inside. The saloon emptied of laughter in an instant. Cards left scattered on tables, whiskey sweating in untouched glasses. The only sound that remained was the steady clop of hooves. Slow as a heartbeat, Crow reined his horse before the sheriff's office. The man behind the badge peeked through his window, but did not step outside. His hands trembled as he pulled the curtains shut. The outlaws spread along the street like wolves scenting weakness. One kicked over a barrel. Another snatched an apple from a crate and bit deep, juice dripping down his chin. A woman hurried across the boardwalk, skirts gathered in her hands, head down. Laughter followed her until she vanished into the shadows. From her porch, Clara Avery watched, her hands folded in her lap, still as stone, though her eyes marked every movement. She saw the way Crow dismounted, boots sinking into the dust with measured weight. She noticed how his men formed a loose circle, careless but practiced, leaving gaps only a sharp eye would catch. The rancher, who had once knelt to her, stood at the far end of the street, hat clutched against his chest. He did not move forward, did not speak. His eyes flicked toward the widow's porch, a silent question hanging in the air. Crow stepped into the road, his voice low, carrying easily in the hush. This town's got more than it needs. We'll take our share. He pointed toward the stores, toward the wagons, toward the ranches beyond. And no one here is fool enough to say no. No one answered. The town had gone mute, shutters blinking like frightened eyes. Only the widow did not flinch. She sat in shadow, her gaze steady, her lips pressed tight, as though the words, "Don't look at me," still trembled there. Yet her eyes followed the rhythm of the raiders' boots, the sway of their rifles, the careless way their fingers brushed their holsters. Above them, clouds bruised the sky. A hawk wheeled once, its cry tearing the silence, then vanished behind the ridge. The wind rose, carrying grit down the street, until it stung the skin and rattled the saloon doors. The raiders laughed and cursed, but the town did not stir. Only Clara's silence sharpened, watching shadows lengthen across the road, as if she already knew how far they would reach. The grave shook beneath the weight of hoofbeats. Ezekiel Crow's voice cut through the air, sharp as a spur. "We'll take the cattle, the grain, and the Avery ranch." Gasps broke from behind shutters. A chair tipped inside the saloon. The sheriff's curtain twitched, then stilled. Clara stood at her fence line. Fingers curled white around the wood. The sky had turned the color of bruised iron, clouds pressing low as if the heavens themselves were listening. Her eyes fixed on Crow where he sat astride his horse, black coat rippling in the rising wind. "Even the dead will serve me," he said, pointing his gloved hand toward the hill where wooden markers leaned in the dust. "Graves make fine firewood." A tremor passed through the town, a sound like prayer swallowed back into throats. Clara's head lowered, hair sweeping across her cheek. For a moment, the same whisper left her lips, the same plea she had carried since sorrow first hollowed her. "Don't look at me." But the words were different now, carried not by shame but by steel. She turned and entered her house. The door creaked, then shut. Shadows swallowed her shape, leaving only silence. Minutes stretched long as the street held its breath. The raiders laughed, tossing stones at windows, spitting into the dirt. "Broken widow?" One jeered. "She'll hand it over." Inside, Clara knelt before a trunk at the foot of her bed. Her hands did not tremble as they lifted the lid. The cloth within smelled of oil and iron, folded around the rifle that had not seen daylight in years. Its barrel gleamed faintly, kissed by the dim lantern light. Beneath it, a revolver waited, ivory handle worn smooth by long-forgotten battles. She laid them on the quilt, steadying each piece as if welcoming back an old friend. Fingers moved with practiced grace, wiping, loading, setting. Every click echoed through the small room like the tolling of a bell. When she rose, the widow no longer wore silence as a shroud. Her eyes burned low, steady embers. The war had left her once, but it had not forgotten her. On the porch, she set the rifle across her lap and looked toward the canyon rim. Thunder growled in the distance, rumbling across stone and sage. Lightning forked, briefly carving her silhouette in silver against the storm. The townsfolk peered from cracks in their doors. They saw her there, unmoving, waiting. Whispers slipped between them like wind through cracks. "That's no broken widow. That's the ghost they said was gone." The raiders mocked still, but some shifted uneasily, eyes narrowing at the figure on the porch. The storm thickened, skies splitting with flashes of fire. Coyotes cried from the ridge. Clara Avery sat in silence, armed and ready, her gaze fixed on the horizon, and the town knew. The storm was no longer in the sky. It had come down to earth and taken the shape of a widow. Dawn bled across the street in shades of red and gold. Dust hung low, stirred only by the shifting of boots. The town was shuttered tight, every window and I too afraid to blink. Clara Avery stepped from her porch, rifle in hand, revolver at her hip. She moved with the calm weight of someone who had walked this path before. Her bare feet pressed into the cold dust, steady, unflinching. Ezekiel Crow stood waiting in the center of the road. His men flanked him, rifles slung loose, grins carved like scars. "Widow Avery," he called, his voice steady as the desert wind. "Best step aside. This ground belongs to me." Clara leveled her rifle. No words, only the click of the hammer drawn back. The rancher who had once knelt to her stood at the far end of the street, hat against his chest, breath caught. He did not shout, did not plead. He only watched, eyes wide as the hush deepened. Crow laughed, sharp and hollow. "You think you can outgun me, woman?" He gestured, and one of his men stepped forward, revolver flashing in the morning light. Clara fired. The shot cracked through the street like thunder. The outlaw dropped before his hand touched leather, dust rising around him in a quiet shroud. Silence. Then the storm broke. Gunfire tore the air. Bullets spat against wood, splintering posts, shattering glass. Clara moved with grim precision. Fire, step, fire again. Each shot struck true, each movement stripped to waste. Years buried beneath grief returned in an instant, every skill honed by war rising like a ghost called home. One raider fell clutching his chest. Another spun into the dust, hat tumbling. A third stumbled back, stunned, before the widow's revolver ended him clean. Crow's grin twisted into a snarl. He drew, faster than most men could breathe, but she was faster still. Their shots cracked together, hers slamming into his shoulder, spinning him sideways. His bullet tore through the edge of her dress, grazing but not stopping her. He staggered, rage darkening his face. "Who in hell are you?" Clara's voice, low and steady, carried down the street. "The widow you should have left buried." The final shot rang out. Crow's body dropped into the dust, still at last. Smoke curled from a revolver, drifting upward as dawn broke clear over the rooftops. Slowly, shutters opened. Faces appeared, eyes wide, mouths parted. The townsfolk stared not at a broken woman, but at the legend standing in their street. Clara did not look back at them. She turned, walking barefoot toward the hill, past the graves bent beneath the rising sun. At her husband's marker, she knelt, whispering the words once more. "Don't look at me." But they did. They always would. For the tale of the barefoot widow spread across the frontier, told in hushed tones and firelight glow. And so it was said for generations. She had turned silence into a name and sorrow into justice.